Sweet.
Is my voice coming through? And it is. Okay, cool. Um, whatchamacallit? I just had an event.
Well, I mean,
What was that?
yeah. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so one of the kittens I had not seen for a handful of hours. And usually it's like, oh, the cat's going to go sleep or hide and just hide. Unfortunately, that was not the case.
Okay.
It like they have a normal food time when they eat because we have an automatic feeder,
Mm-hmm.
and even if I'm not there or if I have one of the cats, the other one will go eat when it hears it, and it didn't. And the food tray was still full, so led me to think, okay, this cat's not here. And then I had looked through all the normal hiding spots and weird hiding spots and whatnot. The fam bam came home and I was like, yo, I can't find this cat. And I was like, you know, one of my family members was like, well, um, last night the cat hid and eventually popped up. So I was like, you know what? I'll go ahead and do that. And an hour or so goes by and nothing. So I'm just like, all right, I'm a little concerned. I'll wait till everyone gets home. Well, I went outside because we're just like thinking, oh, maybe they slipped out or he slipped out. Um,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case. Was not the case. For some reason, somehow, some way, Augie, the orange tabby, he put himself in a spice cabinet, and I guess one of my family members was cooking and closed the door on him, and he had been there the entire time.
Oh no.
So, yeah, because when we tried, because I called for him, and did all of that, couldn't hear him, couldn't find him, and I had the other cat literally in my possession, so I was just like, go find your sibling, go find your litter mate.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Go find your
Nothing,
brother.
or it was
Go
very
find your
faint.
brother.
Right, exactly. Find your brother. But that wasn't the case. So we found him. He was in a freaking cabinet like space, just chilling with all the spices. So I'm sure he is very accustomed to the smell of black pepper, cayenne, and garlic salt, and all of that cooking goodness that I like to use when I cook.
He was,
Um,
just taking his time among the cardamom.
Pretty much, a little clove here, a little pumpkin spice there.
Mm-hmm.
Tis not the season. But
Tis
yeah,
no longer this season, but
tis.
it
I
was.
mean, yeah, you're right. It could have been a lot more so because here's the thing. I like pumpkin stuff. Pumpkin spice I could kind of do without, but we're good there.
Yeah, I'm not sold on pumpkin for anything other than like like pie
Hmm.
occasionally, and like by occasionally I mean like basically once a year.
Right. Um, I'm the opposite. I could do pumpkin all year round, but not pumpkin spice. To me, there's a very distinct difference between the two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because pumpkin spice, you have your clove, your cinnamon, your nutmeg.
Mm.
Pumpkin is the flavor of pumpkin, or at least it's supposed to be,
Typically.
generally
Mm-hmm.
speaking. um, Also, there is something I'd like to address. Um, First off, on top of the cat story, so one of our listeners had a lot to say about our discussion about said college rec center um, story about how what do you call it? How I had mentioned to someone who was completely, made perfumed and all that, just to impress a guy. Um,
At the gym, yeah.
at
Basically,
the rec.
yeah. So rehashing,
Um,
la- uh,
re Going
two
back to
two
it.
weeks ago, yeah.
Yeah, going back to it. Um, the comment struck a bit of a chord, and understandably so, because the way we presented ourselves, it definitely catered towards the fact that it seemed like we were addressing that women should not be all done up in the gym. And on my end, I would like to say that I understand why that happens. But for this particular person, and sorry for the notification if it came through the notification tone, um, is that um, this particular person um, did not really go to the rec to actually work out. And I'm still waiting on a response from that person, the person that I had the discussion with. But it was just particular to that case. And I guess there were some details that were left out that I did not put in. And one of them for sure was that um, this person, other than being pretentious and being a princess, and, that's all fine and dandy, but, um, she was very obnoxious and, what do you call it? And very much so one of those kids who was spoon fed from mommy and daddy's money. So um, it was one of those instances where the all high and mightiness comes through a sense of falseness, where
Mm-hmm.
what do you call it? Where it was more of an image thing than it was an actual like setting of wanting to
Better
exercise,
oneself and
work out.
exercise. Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
there's a huge difference. Like, I get it if you're all dolled up and you're going to perform something. Like, we all wear masks. Like, it's not uncommon to be a different person in front of different groups of people because you play
Hmm.
a role. The role that you play in a friend group is different than a role you play inside of your family. Typically speaking, everyone's a little bit different depending on the people around them. Now,
Right.
gym rats and stuff, I say gym rat as like anyone who like just spends a lot of time at the gym. I don't mean that as a negative or derogatory thing, but like people who spend a lot of time at the gym that do it because the atmosphere is nice, and typically speaking the people who are there that actually want to converse have like tips and tricks and things that work for them and have positive feedback to give, or sometimes they're just there to help you if you accidentally try to go over your max without knowing about it, and you get it up but you can't move it past 90 degrees.
Hmm.
If you have if you're like, I don't know, you're doing like a bench press, or if you're doing like a squat, like that's dangerous. Luckily, they have squat racks and stuff for that. But like even then, if you're doing a freestanding squat with like a lot of weight on you, you could seriously hurt yourself. So having friends is like really, really useful. Now, that being said, we weren't talking about the type of person that is there for the sake of bettering themselves, for the sake of making themselves more healthy, more attractive as a suitable future, uh, I don't know, future Mrs. Somebody, you know. That wasn't her goal. She was
Hmm.
there to show off or showboat or anything, and that is what irked us. It had nothing to do with the fact that she was pretty or she was trying to be pretty. The problem is the
Um,
intent behind the trying to be pretty.
I'm gonna stop you there because that was also a point that was also discussed too. Was that the fact of the matter that there is also toxicity even for just doing something like that, and again, just reiterating that it had to do with the person, not the image that person was trying to convey. And when it comes to being in a gym mentality versus a student rec center in college mentality, it's to me they're very different beasts. I see the gym or a gym as a house of worship, while this student rec center was a small form of that, but also a meeting place for 20 something year olds to intermingle. But one of the things that I wanted to get across was that this person would always complain because this person, like I said, obnoxious princess, whatever, whatnot, would explain to my friend who was her sorority sister
Mm-hmm.
that she was always getting these guys, like hooking these guys, like whatever, but all they did was just basically wanted to, have sex with her. And she wanted more than that. And, that's where it struck the chord because, like, some of the guys that she would try to get were some of my guys, some of the dudes that I would, have class with, go to parties with, or
Mm-hmm.
just like intermingle with just through mutual friends. And a lot of the times is like, yeah, understandably so, but still not great. But the guy mentality was like, yeah, she looks pretty, she looks hot, but I wouldn't want to pursue anything serious with her. And a lot of the times they always mention that seeing, because like you said, for gym rats, for me, I would say gym aficionados,
Mm.
workout hardcore weekenders and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that they
People who
would
are there to
say,
get stuff done. Yeah, it's a little
right,
bit different. Not only that, your expectations shouldn't be so high. Like, first and foremost, the number of college couples that even stick together past the first term is so minuscule. They have like entire like series about it.
but
And
it's also something
it's like,
that,
how many people did you date in college, quote unquote, right?
mhm,
It's really weird. And then for her to complain about hooking up all the time, or not hooking up all the time, but only being singled out by individuals that wanted to hook up and just be platonic as opposed to being committed. She wasn't necessarily putting out the "I want to be committed to" nuance from my
but
from my understanding of what you're saying.
right, but that's also something, it's like, but that's not the point. That's not the point of why we're talking about this. The reason why we're talking about this is that, yeah, she went into the rec center with a really toxic, unfortunate, like not great mentality. And unfortunately, but fortunately, I end up saying some very strict, harsh words that struck a chord. Because one of the things was that a lot of these guys were like, they would probably pursue someone more if, they were there to take care of their business as well. And that's understandable in the gym. Um, and because of that, you know, as harsh as some of the words that I have said to her because of it, I mean, it gave the realization. It's like, oh, hey, shit, I wanted something with depth and I wasn't approaching it like someone who wanted depth.
Mm-hmm.
And, next time around, she ended up going there, working her ass off because she was like, all right, cool. That's what I need to do. And it also betters myself. So fuck yeah.
I mean,
And
good for her. Yeah, no, like, we did kind of leave it on a cliffhanger of her just being like awful, but I'm glad that she actually had personal growth and decided to take a look at her
mm-hmm,
actions and then
mm-hmm,
have higher standards for herself.
yeah. But that's the one thing that was, a concern is because of those insecurities that, you know, not coming from that perspective, coming from a male perspective, it is very different. And, some of the topics that were discussed were talking about the fact that there needs to be all women gyms, which, you know, understandably, I am supportive of, but it's unfortunate to the fact that the reasons why they are made, right? The reason why there have to be all women things because unfortunately, I will say men suck. Toxicity sucks. And
There's equal amounts of toxicity on both sides. Like, it's different. There's a lot more psychological toxicity coming from the female side of the aisle. They manipulate just as effectively as men, if not more so. And I agree. If you wanted to run on a model of women need women only spaces, biological female, mind you, so biological
mm-hmm,
female only spaces, um, go for it. The thing is, there aren't enough biological female women who would actually go to that particular gym. It's not an effective business model. Why? Because
I would go
uh,
ahead.
uh, it's not a very effective business model, considering the fact that a female only gym would require a large sum of money, and since the earning gap between men and women is still rather vast, it's really hard for them to have the supplemental income or the amount of income required to have a monthly gym membership to have all of the facilities up to par with a co-ed gym, because you have twice as many income earners that
Fair.
are going to be throwing their money at this particular gym.
Fair. But the thing with what you said is that I have to disagree upon, because there are thriving all women gyms, all female gyms. And in that aspect, it's also, that's why what I mean is that it is a safe place for them. But the reason being is because of outside factors due to, a lot of toxicity. There's a lot of toxicity that can come from that place of, of handling working out. And it creates, a lot of bad habits, or a lot of times because guys aren't like us, straight up. And because of
No,
it,
but they've got their own things going on, and women aren't like us either, thankfully. I'd be terrified if I ever met a woman that was like me.
but what I'm going with is the fact that it's like, hey, this, and when you mentioned the whole sum of money about these places of venue, yeah, there aren't very many
Yeah.
women gyms, granted, but there are women gyms,
Oh,
all women
true,
gyms,
true.
right?
But so far as a successful business model, there's a reason why 24-hour fitness, 24-hour fitness, Planet Fitness, um, Anytime Fitness, and like the major chains and stuff are so
Mm-hmm.
huge because they're readily available, and their model is to quote unquote not discriminate,
Right,
as
but
opposed to
that's
creating a quote unquote safe space for female individuals,
mm-hmm,
biologically female individuals. Now,
mm-hmm,
unfortunately, there's been a lot of litigation on whether or not biological females should be allowed to not. Uh, uh, Technically speaking, if we're going by just the the Equal Rights Act, I believe is 1969, Equal Pay Act, as well as um, certain civil rights that we've established, having a gender discriminating safe place that is considered a quote unquote commons shouldn't exist. But because it's a private business, it can exist. So private businesses are allowed to be quote unquote gender discriminating. But it ultimately they're cutting off a revenue
right.
stream, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Like there's a reason why there's almost no gentlemen's clubs anymore, like men's only clubs in this day and age. It's because there are quite a few women who would like to be part of a gentleman's club because they like the atmosphere, or they like to, maybe they just want to talk to men about men's stuff, which is really
Mm-hmm.
rare, but it happens.
Um,
Am I
sorry,
making sense, or am I like?
I mean, you are, but also at the same time too, the topic about that whole segment is to, it's I wouldn't say it's irrelevant, but it's not the point that is trying to be conveyed. Is yes, you are giving me all the facts, and that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact of the matter is that this is going based on the experiences that we cannot experience because we do not have a female reproductive organ. You know, we do not have certain biological facts that is not part of us. So it is fair to say that we cannot relate to it. Yes, we
We
have the
we can
data.
we can empathize. We can't sympathize, but we can empathize.
Yeah,
Being a human being with emotions means that we can understand that yes, it would be potentially scary or disheartening even to see being in a man's gym, considering the fact that men are biologically stronger, pound for pound, muscle for muscle, just due to our testosterone advantage. I can see how that would be very discouraging to a woman, and that's why a woman only gym would be really interesting or really intriguing for a female to want to go to. Like
But it's
I'm
not
not
only
discrediting that. I'm not trying to
right.
discredit any of these things. What I'm saying is you shutting down the conversation, or our understanding of the conversation because we don't have a direct key to that perspective doesn't actually resolve anything. Now, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if we didn't have the original conversation. So if we didn't have the original conversation, you wouldn't have had someone else put their input in and talk to you about why they had misgivings about our original conversation.
Right. But
Conversation
what
is the most important thing here. It's not whether or not we can experience their experience. Like that's not a question. That's a fact. We
right.
don't have those biological processes. We don't
But
have
we're
these
not allowed
like
Caleb, but we're not allowing ourselves to empathize because realistically all we're doing is mansplaining. Do you get what I'm
I,
saying though?
okay.
Do you get what I'm saying though?
I'm
Reel it
going to
back.
agree to disagree with you on the topic of mansplaining
Reel it
because
back.
it's a gendered term. By its like in general, there is no reason for that term to even exist.
Fair. But what I am saying is that is what we are doing. That is what is currently happening. Because we just dismiss the fact of the matter of what we were trying to talk about. And what I wanted to say was that it goes far beyond what we can understand. And yes, you're giving the facts. And yes, they are correct. But that is not what this is about.
No, it's about their feelings, isn't it?
Yes, and that's something that I know I have a hard time
It's
acknowledging.
unfortunate, but facts don't care about feelings. They really don't.
But
Like the mansplaining term was pretty recently used by the feminist movement to shut down any time a man tried to talk at all, which is why it's actually very, very rude to even bring up.
but why are you taking offense to it? Because you are. You're
well,
being
I mean,
very defensive about it.
I would be defensive of it because it's an attack on men.
Okay, so what of it? Why does that matter? Because this is the
Um,
conversation not about us. It is not about us, Caleb.
it's about some hypothetical woman that I've never met. It's about our lived experiences based on these topics.
It's
And
about addressing the fact that what we had said was conveyed a different way.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
what it's about.
yeah, it was conveyed the way that we intended it to be. Now, whether or not a person takes that their own way, that's on them. Like ultimately, I'm not going to tailor my speech according to what somebody else says unless they can give me a convincing argument saying that what I'm
And
saying is going to negatively affect someone else. Like, if I'm physically attacking somebody, I would like to know that I'm physically attacking somebody. I'm not, though. I'm just stating my opinion on something. And
fair.
if that ends up being their opinion versus my opinion, opinions are like armpits. Everyone has one. Or two.
And we're not talking about the opinions. We are addressing what we had said. Going back to it. Going back to square one.
Okay.
We are addressing what we said.
Mm-hmm.
Correct?
Yes. So,
Right.
are
And
you
what I said,
expecting us to... are we
I'm
addressing it as in we're supposed to feel sorry for what we said? Or...
no, I am addressing that some things were miscommunicated and there is no need to defend it. Not the whole story was there.
Okay. So, I'm glad
Right?
that we have the clarification. It's good that we got that clarified.
I don't even know if we did. Just because of the fact that, going off on saying the word mansplaining and taking offense to it.
What if I were to say a woman who was trying to describe a man's problem was womansplaining? Would that not trigger something in the woman to say that I was discriminating against her based on her gender?
I don't know. I am not a woman, so I cannot answer that for you.
Yes, you can.
And no, I can't.
Yes, you can. No, it's a very simple logical argument. If you were to discredit something somebody says based on their gender, that's sexist. It doesn't matter whether or not that person is a woman or a man. If you are discrediting or telling them that their opinion doesn't matter based on their gender, that is the origin of sexism.
Fair. But we are not discrediting anything. We are not discrediting what we said, what we did, or what we meant.
You said I'm basically mansplaining, which is why it's really interesting that you would bring up that term, because that's not part of your typical jargon.
No, it's not.
So somebody put that term into your brain to bring up for the sake of the argument.
No one brought that up other than myself.
Okay, so why would you use a term that in and of itself is a sexist term to describe what I'm doing?
Because there was no empathizing at all with any of the conversation that we had. And that's the whole point that I'm trying to put out, is that we lack empathy in some cases. And during that conversation, we did. Like I said, I'm not discrediting what we said or what we meant or what was conveyed. I'm just saying we did not empathize with it. Because it's hard for us to empathize for something that we do not have. We do not have to walk into a place of, of exercising worship, thinking that, in some cases, yeah, guys are assholes. And you're absolutely correct that it could be conveyed the other way, where girls can be assholes.
Yeah, no, but people can be assholes in and of themselves. Right. Humanity kind of sucks. We know this, but it goes both ways, which means that everyone is under the same amount of pressure. It's just a different type of pressure. Think about the guy that goes to the gym, and it just so happens to be ladies' night. He didn't know it was ladies' night. He walks in. Every single one of those women are going to look at him like he's scum because he showed up on ladies' night.
Not necessarily. It depends on how he handles himself, correct? Yeah. It's how he handles himself in the situation.
It depends on how she handles herself in the situation. It's the exact same thing. Ultimately, it comes down to personal responsibility and whether or not you elect to go to the gym. You're choosing to go to the gym whether you are male or female, and you're choosing to possibly be judged by your peers because you're in public. The expectation that we're going to capitulate to an individual based on whether or not they feel comfortable or not in a place that they choose to be. No one is forcing her to be at this gym or him to be at this gym or to be anywhere, really. We have this wonderful, wonderful thing called free will, and it allows us to choose the environments that we want to be in.
Right. But granted, like we talked about when it came to the whole all women's gym, not as very many because of the facts that you gave and you provided. But what if that is not a preference of someone who wants to have that preference?
Could you elaborate? If it's not a preference of the person.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just say, because I can't relate to this, but if I end up having to be a lady going into a gym and there's always constantly this one guy who basically harasses me there, right? We're putting this in a hypothetical.
Oh, okay.
That he harasses me, right? But let me finish.
Okay.
Let me finish. So I know of an all-female gym, correct? I know about it. Mm-hmm. And I want to go there. Unfortunately, due to the certain circumstances of location, that let's just say this all-female gym is 30 miles away. Unfortunately, 30 miles away. And the only options I have are this gym, that gym, and another gym. But the preference that I would like to go to is an all-women's gym, correct?
Okay, so preference, okay.
Right, and I cannot make that, even though I have a choice, right?
Yes, you can. You can choose. There are billions of choices in that situation, in that one hypothetical. In that singular hypothetical, there are any number of choices that this hypothetical woman could do. She doesn't need to go to that gym. She doesn't need to go to a gym at all. If she wants to go to a gym, she can choose to go to a different gym in the area so that she is not encountering this particular individual. choice. It comes down to choice and responsibility. She needs to know where her comfort zone is, and she needs to find it herself. It's not like, obviously, I hate this hypothetical douchebag that's causing her trouble and who's harassing
Right.
her. But talk to any other man at the gym and say, hey, that guy's harassing me. What is a brother going to do? He's going to walk up to the guy and be like, hey, what the hell are you doing?
Right.
Like, all
But
you need
it's
to
not
do
nec-
is ask for a little bit of assistance, which shouldn't be difficult because
Right.
every man, like myself, yourself, any woman comes up to us, grabs our arm and says, help me. What's the first thing you do? You're about to punch somebody in the fucking face for this person you don't even know
Right.
because it's
But here's the
ingrained. It's
but here's the
ingrained in
point
our
I'm
society.
but here's the point I'm trying to make is that shouldn't be there in the first place, and we both know that.
You can't. Okay, so the hypothetical asshole that is harassing this one female shouldn't be there.
Right. Should not. But
I
still
agree.
there.
I agree.
Right?
But she doesn't need to be there either.
Fair. But that's what I'm.
But
that's,
we can't
that's-
we can't legislate things based on the hypothetical of an asshole existing because there are assholes everywhere, of both
Right.
genders, or any
Right.
number of non-denominational what have yous. Like
Fair.
It doesn't. You can't try to force a society to evolve around the idea of non-existence.
But that's also where it comes down to things that shouldn't be occurring that do occur. And that's also something that I'd like to say is that we can't really relate to it as often as that.
Relate to what as often as that?
Dealing with situations like that.
Sexual harassment from counterparts of the opposite sex?
It happens, for sure it happens, but we don't have it often.
No, it's not culturally acceptable in one direction. In the other direction, it is more than culturally acceptable. If a man gets ogled by a group of women and catcalled by a group of women, the man, his entire day is made by that. Like, like everything about him feels better because he's being, objectified, quote unquote, using the terminology that they would. Flip it. If a woman were to get catcalled by a bunch of men, all of a sudden she shuts down and she feels like she's being attacked or harassed. Like, it's not the same. Culturally speaking, it only travels in one direction. If you look at, like, media, look at the movies. Look specifically at movies that are written and directed by a female director or a female directed or guided with the hands of feminists. Let's take the wonderful, wonderful reproduction of Ghostbusters, for instance. There's an entire scene that is absolutely disgusting, where they have a very good-looking male assistant that is just being talked terribly about, like lustily and stuff, right in front of his face. If they were to do that in any other office situation and flip the roles, male to female, female assistant that's being talked that way, that's any number of violations. What we're talking about is it's not a two-way street. It only goes in one direction. So by that fact alone, it makes no sense. Like, you can't cater to people who choose to be somewhere to force other people not to be there.
Right. So let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Have you been sexually harassed by the opposite sex?
Yes. I've been sexually harassed by the same sex.
Well, same, but
Right? Okay, so it happens all the time. The thing is...
I would like to say it doesn't. I mean, for the times that it has happened to me, did I enjoy it? No. But
No.
the fact of the matter is that it's not a common occurrence.
No, it's not as commonly talked about. Once again, it only goes in one direction. Now, culturally speaking, if I were to be harassed by, let's say, an older woman in a grocery store decides to shove her hand in my back pocket and cut my ass. This has actually happened before.
Mm-hmm.
You just smile and say, "Excuse me, will you please remove your hand from my pocket?" Why? Because what's going to happen? Nothing's going to happen. Nothing happens. Like, is a police officer going to arrest her for sexual harassment? No. Now, if I were to do that to a woman's jeans pocket and shove my hand in her jeans pocket, all of a sudden I am on the sex offender list. It only travels in one direction. Not only that, men are on the receiving end of harassment and abuse in a 40-60 split. 40% is often, and that's with underreporting. Like, even with underreporting, like, they are almost as often harassed against sexually. Now, if we were talking about physical harassment and everything, it's in the orders of magnitude greater than that of women. Men are attacked far more often than women are. Physically attacked, mind you. Like, actually, like, jumped and everything. That happens, it's significantly more often to men. Now, to put another thing into perspective, there's only one men's harassment or men's abuse shelter in America currently. There are thousands upon thousands of women's abuse shelters, and they're all fully funded. Like, if we're really talking about a type of equality and understanding and empathy, it's really interesting that the people who are empathized with the most say that they receive it the least.
Okay. So, with that said, it's, I mean, that's right? But I'm not trying to counter argue, and I'm not trying to dismiss.
Okay.
But that sense of inequality is absolutely fair, right?
I'm trying to. Okay, so let's get our definitions down so that we can be on a level playing field. What does feminism fight for?
I don't know. You tell me.
Okay. So, the definition is for equal rights between men and women. That is what feminism has been fighting for since suffrage, women's suffrage in England. Probably a little bit before that, but there were a lot of egalitarian societies before, but they didn't last very long. Ancient Ireland is actually one of them. Same thing goes for the Norse. They were pretty close to egalitarian, but they didn't last.
Okay.
Now, societies in which women are treated as special, above, being of greater worth because of their ability to produce offspring and to mother and to raise children, things that all of those societies are still around today. Because women should be cherished, they should be loved, and they should be taken care of to the degree that they choose to be taken care of.
Okay.
Now, unfortunately, in practice, what's happened is things have been even between men and women outside of social norms for a little over 50 years. Legally speaking, anything a man can do, a woman can do, and more. Women have more legal rights than men do. A lot more, in fact. In some states, they have the ability to commit mass murder whenever they see fit. But we don't have those rights as men. We don't have a lot of the things that we have. I don't want to say awarded, because that sounds like it's something that was earned through the process of trial and effort. But through the years and years of pushing on a particular subject, claiming victimhood for whatever reason, and using niche cases, they've swung the paradigm really, really far. Right now, women between the ages of 22 and 35 out-earn men in that same income bracket. They out-earn men for that period of pay. Same thing goes for women that are 35 to 48. They out-earn men in their same fields, despite the fact that they actually work less hours and they have more leave days than men do. Like, if we're talking about a society in which they are fighting for equality, they kind of pushed really, really far past that
Right.
a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's not even bringing up prison sentencing. For the same crime, a woman will do maybe half the time. At most.
Okay.
And that's if she gets charged at all.
Mm-hmm. Right.
A rather famous woman got away with destroying tens of thousands of public documents. And the FBI found her not guilty, despite the fact that all of the evidence shows that it was malicious.
Mm-hmm.
If a man had done that, federal prison. It's when you start talking about rights or you start talking about social things, it's really easy to see that the cultural, or at least in certain parts of America, they try to represent themselves as lesser and therefore greater than, if that makes sense.
It does. Did you have more to also explain or discuss?
No, like, I'm hoping that you can see where I'm coming from when it comes to the use of gender terminology to disregard that is regularly used. I know that you were not intending to use it as such, but is quite regularly used to disregard the statements of a biological male because somehow your gender determines whether or not you can be knowledgeable about a topic.
Right.
Be it biological or otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
I can read just as many books as any other person. It doesn't matter their gender. I have the ability to read, I have the ability to learn, and I have the ability to grow.
Mm-hmm. Understandable.
The only thing that I can't do is I can't have a female brain and I can't have a female reproductive system.
Right.
And unless I'm in California, in which case, technically speaking, I can. If I say it is. Yeah.
We do not need to get into that kind of conversation.
No, we really don't. That's like that would be a bad take.
Because the whole point of me bringing this up in the first place was to have a discussion, right?
I feel like we've had a very productive discussion.
Yeah, almost an hour-long discussion.
This is probably the longest we've ever stayed remotely on topic.
Right.
Ever.
Yeah. But, I mean, for the most part, it really sets a discussion on what it means for equality, just in general. And you expressed it, how in terms for certain aspects for men, it doesn't. And
yeah, no, like,
and
the problem is with my own personal beliefs that I don't want equality. Men and women are special in their own ways, and they need to be special in their own ways.
Mm-hmm.
Men, in general, need to be protectors, need to be providers, and I believe that that's a good thing, and it should be fostered that men are expected to and praised for being protectors and providers, whereas women are special in their ability to nurture, to care, to feel.
Right.
I feel like I feel that women should be praised for those abilities. Different.
And they are.
But
They are.
It has, like, but so far as the eyes of the law go, men and women have been absolutely equal since about 1969.
That's certainly on paper.
Well, I mean, in practice, every single time that it's been found otherwise, there's been a huge civil suit in who gets paid out, the lawyers.
Right.
And sometimes the plaintiffs, but more often than not, it's the lawyers.
But here's the reason why that, yes, in that aspect, I agree with you, but I also disagree with you. For the fact that, yeah, generally speaking, it's understandable why men are better suitors to be protectors and whatnot, and why women are better suited to be nurturers, but that isn't necessarily always the case,
No,
right?
but you can't dictate based on outliers.
No, no, not at all. But here's the thing:
And
is
if
that
you're
with
talking
those,
about women actually being better nurturers, if you actually look at the demographics, the number of children that are single mother raised turn out within the bottom 50%, whereas single father raised children end up in the upper 75%. So, income wise, and then quality of life is a little bit different. But if you're talking just like base numbers, you're
right?
actually better to have a single dad than you are to have a single mom. Now,
Okay,
the problem with that is, even adjusted for data, even adjusted for the fact that the number of single fathers out there is really, really low per capita, you've still got like a 20 to 30% better likelihood of having a decent life if you have a if you're raised by a single father than you are
mm-hmm.
if you have a single mother, despite the fact that there are any number of social programs there that physically exist that we pay for with tax dollars to help single mothers raise their children. So, like, when we're talking about outliers, that there are definitely outliers that,
Right,
there are some very strong women out there that are very, very good with guns and knives, and that would kick my ass, and are in the
right.
military. But if you try to equate them to their male counterpart in the exact same arena, they can't. This is why the Olympics are segregated according to gender. Yeah, like when you're talking about physical prowess and ability, there's actually this huge thing that's happening right now. The transgender woman that just set a new world record for the women's freestyle or something like that. Like, I think she
Right.
was like 38 seconds ahead of her
Mm-hmm.
counterparts. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing. That's crazy to think that there's that much of a gap.
Right. Um, wait, hold on. Repeat the first part. I vaguely am remembering what you said about the swimmer, but the prior part. What about her?
Oh, she was previously male.
Yeah. And there's a lot of clout with her right now because of it.
Oh yeah,
And
definitely. I mean, to the point that Olympic coaches, or not Olympic, the professional coaches, several of them have quit over it because they've pushed so far on a particular narrative that you are whatever you feel like,
mm-hmm.
that they've lost focus. What
Mm-hmm.
sports are supposed to be is an individual choosing to be the best that they can and competing against other people who are also trying to be the best that they can. But that doesn't matter if you throw someone who is not of the same gender, not of the same like didn't
I
grow up
think
with
I think you're
the same physical inhibitors.
I
Estrogen
think I
actually
think
limits the amount of muscle growth that you can have. It also increases the severity of aging. Like, it
um
also reduces the amount of muscle mass you're physically capable of putting on. It changes so many different things. Meanwhile, testosterone is something that is in abundance in men, on the orders of magnitude greater in men, which strengthens bones, increases
mhm.
muscle density, increases elasticity in tendons. Like, when you try to compete, put them against each other, it's actually really kind of interesting because there's not a single men's only sport.
Right.
Not
I'm trying to think. I'm literally trying to think.
Yeah, no.
As far as
So far as culturally acceptable sports around the world, there's not a single televised men's only sport. There's nothing in the charter that prevents a woman trying out and being on the NFL or
mhm.
the NBA or MLB or any the volleyball league. I can't remember what that's called. Or NHL. There you go. NHL is probably the best one. There's no charter. There's nothing that prevents a woman from trying to compete. on. I say trying, but I don't mean that patronizingly. It's just they don't do it ever. And when offered, even for charity, Serena Williams actually said, rather famously, that she will never do even a charity match against a male in tennis because they're in a completely different, like, if you take just Serena Williams metrics, like how fast she can serve, how quickly she can cover the distance in the court, she falls around somewhere, I think it's the 75th percentile, which means 75% of all male tennis players are as good, if not better, than Serena Williams, despite the fact that she's dominating the female tennis like world. She's like one of the greatest female tennis players of all time, and she falls short by 75% when pitted against a male counterpart. She won't even do it for charity because despite how humble she actually really is, she doesn't brag all that often. And it's one of the things I really respect about Serena Williams. She knows that the point of a charity event is to be entertaining so that people will donate more money. People don't donate to non-underdog victories. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
But either way, it's still an interesting discussion, is it not?
Oh, it's a fantastic discussion. I love talking about it because most people won't even listen as the second I start bringing up anything that has to do with some of the trials and tribulations of being biologically male.
Oh, and just to continue, because you've been doing this a lot, the term that you're looking for when it's biologically male and biologically female is sex. Gender is the construct of what we believe we are. Because sex is determined based on X and Y chromosomes, just to reiterate.
They only changed that definition recently. Up until 10 years ago, it has always been gender and sex are interchangeable. If you look in the writings of several doctors going all the way back to, I believe the 1960s was the first time they started putting gender on medical forms. Before that, it was sex. And even to this day, most medical forms do say sex or gender, and they do use them interchangeably. It is only within the last 10 years or so that we started using gender to mean anything other than biologically male or biologically female. So, although it's colloquially accepted that when I refer to a person's gender, I'm referring to their gender identity, which is a completely different thing devoid of gender, because there's non-binary, which doesn't make any sense because gender is binary. It's a 1 or a 0. You can't not be that. Just by sheer logical, just sheer follow through.
Yeah.
You can have an asexual orientation. You can choose not to be attracted or to be attracted to both or anything like that. But it doesn't change that whether or not you feel a certain way, gender is inextricably and irrevocably tied to biology. Because whenever a person who says that they're opposite gendered, or maybe they have actual clinical gender dysphoria, they believe that they're the opposite gender. Like and like in those cases, most of the time, the people who are championing the legislation to ban certain type of speech that are trying to limit the what can be talked about are the people who actual people with gender dysphoria don't like. Because more often than not, it's a cause that is being hijacked by activists that just want screen time.
Okay.
Like I know it's very charged. It's a very, very charged like topic, and I mean, mind you,
It very much so is.
yeah, it's going to be, because anytime you start talking about things that are non-quantifiable, that have shifting definitions on the second. I mean, there are people who are quote unquote part of the trans community that believe that they should be able to transition their ethnicity, because ethnicity is a construct. Nationality is a construct. If everything is what we say it is, and words don't have meanings, and we can make them mean anything, then nothing has meaning. Like there's nothing to argue about. It devolves really, really quickly into a bunch of Alice in Wonderland-esque nonsense.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean any of this to be like rude or mean. I mean this because language is based on a mutual understanding. If a word means something and somebody else thinks that it means something else, then how are they supposed to converse about that something if the definitions are not finalized? And if by its inception it's supposed to not have a finalized definition, if it's not, like, arguing about the word supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, right? It's a word that you say when you have nothing else to say, or there's nothing else to say. Like, it doesn't. It just exists for the sake of taking up space. Now, if we were to say that it actually means that you're trying to make a point and you don't have a point to, you can't make your point because you're not articulate enough, or you don't have adequate knowledge to fulfill the burden of interest, or burden of proof, as it were, to fulfill your point, then you're changing the definition of what the word actually means. And that's why definitions are so important. English is, or every language really, English is one of the languages where we don't actually have direct gendered speech. Like, to put in French, when you're referring to a female, you use la, and if you're referring to a male, it's le. Le garçon, the boy, la fille, the woman, or the girl. So, I believe Spanish is similar.
It's L and A, or, yes, it's the same. It's the same because they all come from the same Latin roots.
Yeah. So Latin in and of itself is based on the differentiation between whether or not something is masculine or something is feminine, right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the love languages are that way. I think German has its own separate thing that's very similar. I haven't delved into that too much because, although I would love to learn it, it doesn't mesh with my brain correctly for some reason. Japanese is very similar, except instead they have very specific terms for an individual, and then they have very broad terms for individuals.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, and we do use he, she pronouns. But if you want a gender-neutral pronoun that doesn't offend people, you can't say one anymore. Because binary, 1 and 0. And you can't refer to a female as a 0 because that would hurt their feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So we end up with they, which is a plurality, which will offend people who have a singular personality. When you start like trying to capitulate language so that you don't offend people, you end up in a lot of logical loops, to the point where a very famous politician used the term womenixen to refer to transgender women being included in women, and the entire conglomerate of women, or the Women's Coalition, I can't remember what it's called, basically yelled at that politician because trans women are women. Like, so it gets really, really hectic if you're trying to change your speech in such a way that you offend no one. Ultimately, the best way to offend no one is to not talk, and I don't believe in not talking.
I think it's when you have your own opinion. I agree with that. But as in not offending is, I would say more so for the fact that it's, if you have an opinion, yes, don't be afraid to discuss about it.
Yeah,
but
people should be able to express their opinions. Like, I am more than willing to listen to a person talk about their lived experiences and why they think certain things should be a certain way. That being said, they should be able to listen when I try to explain or try to help them understand why certain things can't be a certain way. It's conversation. Conversation is a give and take. It's an ebb and flow.
Right, but also it allows. That's also another thing too. Is that's the whole thing about the conversation, right? Is being able to listen. Is that you're absolutely right that you have every right to invoke your way of being able to speak, but I wholeheartedly agree with the fact that there is a time and place.
Oh yeah,
And also sometimes
tact
right,
is a thing. Tact is definitely a thing, and I
and
agree.
knowing when to let those opinions be known, right? Because otherwise you're just dominating a conversation, and there's a lack of self-awareness that that's the case, because that's what can occur.
Yes.
Because of it.
Yes, that's that happens a lot, unfortunately. But more often than not, it's a person trying to explain a topic that they are very learned about, and instead of it being a conversation, it ends up being a lecture. And I know that I have a very scholarly way of explaining things that presents itself as me trying to browbeat a point into another person I'm discussing with. That being said, I'm trying. Yeah, no, like we're going to look. I'm pretty sure that this has been 90% me talking.
Just a small degree.
No, like I'm pretty sure, like statistically, if I were to like cut out, like, yeah.
I mean, you'll get to see it when you do the editing.
Yes, indeed.
But that's fair, and I'm sure we'll come across this discussion again.
Oh, definitely. Like, especially, like I'm really interested because I've obviously had my time to explain my deeper thoughts and opinions on speech and feelings, emotions, facts, how they should all relate in normal conversation. Like I get, I'm thinking, like, I don't want to assume, but I feel like you have a very nuanced emotional response to trying to tailor your speech so that you are being cordial, and I really appreciate that.
And I mean, more so for the fact that it's like, it comes back to the degree of knowing when to speak and knowing when to invoke your opinions. And, granted, knowing you're more so a very logical, factual person. And not saying that I'm not, but in the case between the two of us, you more so than I am.
Yeah, you're very much either Picard or Kirk. I'm pretty much Spock, or
pretty much if we want to take it back into to the fandoms with Star Trek. But yeah, this is actually pretty solid for a supplemental episode, if I'm not mistaken.
I would hope so. I mean, ultimately, I'm pretty sure. If we were to have enough viewers, they would more than likely side with you, because it sounds like I'm attacking you, and I'm really not. I really don't want that to be the case, but
no, it's very much so. There's very much so a sense of duality, and when the conversation that was given to me about it, like, the conversation was very passionate, and especially on both sides, and more so for the fact that it was like, hey, I didn't realize that these topics or this part of that conversation occurred to me at all. And someone voiced their opinion and someone voiced their reasoning with facts. And it gave me an insight to not only empathize, but also, to a degree, better myself, because it's like, okay, this is something that didn't really cross my mind. That's why some of the points that I had tried to put out were tailored that way. And more so, it's not playing devil's advocate, but it's literally empathizing, of like putting the situation in that position. And
in
you
the
can
right
only
context,
empathize so much.
Yeah, in the right context, it's really easy to feel or to emote what the other person is feeling. Like, obviously, the individual that brought this to your attention, and listened to it, and explained it to you, had a very impassioned belief that what you said was not fully nuanced enough, and therefore they gave their opinion so that you could get a more once again, I'm going to use nuance because that's probably the best way to put it, a more nuanced understanding of where that other individual might be coming from. But you wouldn't have had that conversation had you not espoused your thoughts to begin with. So I think conversation, like just us talking, is so important because it opens us up to differing opinions. It opens us up to be able to hear them and to rationalize our own beliefs. Like I wouldn't, trying to like put this into perspective for my own self, but like I wouldn't find the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster hilarious if I were not raised Protestant Christian.
Right.
Like, now, I'm not ridiculing the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster. May he bless them with his nudity appendages ramen. But I'm saying in order for comedy exist, comedy to continue to exist, people need to have conversations and hear ideas that are so far away from what they believe or they feel that they can either take it offensively or they can just laugh about the differences, because differences are kind of funny. There's a reason why one of my favorite linguistic jokes is any oxymoron. Jumbo shrimp is hilarious to me. Like, that is so funny. It's like, it's a jumbo shrimp, but shrimps are small, and it's big, but it's big and it's small.
But it's a big small.
No, it's weird. It's a big small. It's a big small. It's the big small. Now, mind you, I've actually seen jumbo shrimp that are like larger than some crabs I've seen. It's like it's hilarious that's a thing.
But it's also due to the language.
Oh yeah, no, we contradict ourselves within a single sentence so often it's commonplace now.
It's like, how many words is it for buffalo to be a sentence?
I think it's 8.
7. Is it 8? I thought it was 7. It could be 8.
Yeah, no, it's if I remember correctly, the translation comes down to a group of buffaloes were being aggressive towards another group of buffaloes from Buffalo. Or is it a group of buffaloes from Buffalo are being aggressive towards another group of buffaloes from Buffalo?
I think that's the one.
I think that's the one. But it's what it's.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for the supplemental episode. This has gone quite long.
but it was an important topic, and we did stay mostly on topic for it. So I feel like, by and large,
for sure,
yeah, it needed to be talked about, because obviously I enjoyed this so much, because it's very rare that we actually get to talk about these types of things in just normal day-to-day stuff. It is so rare, because this is so far out of normal, like, geekdom. Like, this is... yeah.
It's one of those topics, but, I mean, let's have the listeners put their opinions in when we do this, when we post it.
I hope so. I want comments out the yin-yang. I don't want them picking sides. I want them all to, like, express their own nuanced understandings of the proposals that we've put forth. They're not really arguments so much as an expression of our own ideas within the knowledge that we have.
Is it, though?
I mean, but you didn't disagree with me, and therefore it's not an argument.
There have been plenty of points where I disagree with you. I will say that, and what do you call it? And I'm sure we'll. I know I've said it already, but I'm sure we'll come back to it. Come back to this conversation, whether it's the next time we record or later down the road.
Yes, indeed. Now,
All right.
hopefully, the individual that talked to you does listen to this so that they can see a little bit more where we're coming from and where everything goes. That we did try to express and understand where they were coming from.
Yeah, I'll let that person know. All
Spectacular.
right. Ciao.
Sayonara.